the camaraderie, the bonhomie, the relationship strength at the personal level that has been so spoken about in various quarters, from commentators to journalists to politicians to other observers of this relationship for long term, that was fully at display right at the moment they entered the Oval Office. From there onwards, in the public commentary, at every possible occasion, two leaders were highly complimentary of each other. President Trump, in fact, called Mr. Narendra Modi a great leader to begin with. That was his kind of opening remarks that he made the moment the press briefing, the first round of the press briefing, just immediately after the opening statements of the two leaders began. He said Mr. Modi is a great leader and he is doing great work back home. He's doing a lot of good work back home. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in his turn, during the press conference at the press conference room of the White House, said that President Trump has the best interest of American people at his heart. When we think of MAGA, which is Make America Great movement, Make America Great Again movement, we think of President Trump, and that is something on which, on those lines, we also wish to work back in India, and he coined a new term called MEGA. So that personal chemistry, that personal bonding, that personal bonhomie was fully and completely at display to begin with. And then my sense is, as I've been saying right from the word go, that it would be completely unfair, not just to this relationship, but to the peoples of these two countries. Remember, Indians and Americans have a natural liking for each other. And I mean, 3 million, close to 3 million students in the American universities is a great proof of that. Parents feel safe in sending their children to America, and nothing can be more complimentary than that to a nation which is so far away from Indian shores. Other than that, of course, diaspora is extremely strong, one of the richest and the most influential and most well-educated group in United States. So that natural liking and that natural bonding between United States and America was also fully at display. And as I said, that it would be extremely unfair to look at these meetings only through the prism of tariffs, tariffs, and tariffs. There was too much noise about tariffs that was going on for a significant period of time just because President Trump announced certain tariffs on certain countries through executive orders. This relationship today is certainly not held hostage by any particular dimension. It is a 360-degree, complete, full gamut of relationship, as Foreign Secretary just now said, something on very solid ground. And therefore, some $100 million of tariff here or there won't make, even if they come along. Although the Foreign Secretary finally, summing it all up, said that tariffs came up very, very naturally, meaning thereby that there was no aggressive stance or the posture displayed at any stage by either the American delegation, American teams, or the President himself. So quite clearly, as I said, that this is a multifarious relationship. The entire gamut of relationship, as always, people being the centerpiece of that relationship, moved forward. There were substantive issues that were discussed. Issues related to trade deficit, of course, is an important point. At this point in time of the Trump administration as it takes shape, and Mr. Donald Trump carries on from his campaign promises made to the American people. And India has said that, through our energy purchases, we have already done a purchase of nearly $15 billion of energy last year, which is in an automatic natural course set to rise up to $25 billion, which means that through the natural course of action, the trade deficit would come down. Other than that, my sense is that on illegal migration, on legal migration, on H-1B visas, on extradition of a key Mumbai 2611 plotter, Tahavur Hussain Rana, significant progress has been made. Significant progress has also been made in terms of deepening the ties by India opening 2 new consulates in Boston and Los Angeles, which means India's presence in the United States of America would now be the largest diplomatic presence India has in any country of the world, and also any other country having that kind of presence in the United States of America. Tanemo?
Right, Nikunj Garg there reporting live from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much. Appreciate you joining us from there. I'm also joined on the broadcast by Congressman Rich McCormick. He is the Congressman for Georgia's 7th District. Congressman McCormick, thank you so much for speaking to us here on NDTV. We, of course, had lengthy discussions on what were some of the key takeaways for India, but for the world, how are you viewing, especially from the US, this big visit by Prime Minister Modi?
Well, first of all, it shows what important partners we are in the strategic alliance going forward. That region of the world that has 70% of the world's population, which about 70% of the world's wealth travels through those corridors, where you have huge military presences in both countries, in China, in India. Of course, you have a nuclear peer in Pakistan. Just having somebody in that region that sees the world very similarly, who has a constitution that's very similar, who has aspirations to be the third largest economy in the world in the next 5 years, someone who could be a great trading partner, someone who could buy military equipment from us, someone who can really become so close and really become allies so that we can protect each other into the future and really progress together.
Congressman McCormick, how do you think, India should be viewing? Of course, it was a good meeting. That's been the general view for everybody who has, in fact, talked to us after the bilateral as well as the joint statement that we heard from both leaders. But how do you think India should view Trump 2.0 government? We are, of course, interested, as the Foreign Affairs Ministry spokesperson also said, in terms of progressing naturally from the first era of the Trump government now to this one. But, we've seen a more aggressive stance being taken by President Trump on many fronts, of course. So according to you, how should India be viewing the current US government and the engagements that we can have in the near future?
Sure. Well, let's talk about what's the same first. Prime Minister Modi came over here, had a big get together in Houston, and there was a huge turnout. In my district, we have about 14% of my district is made up of Indian diaspora. Huge, very important. One of the reasons that we're the top 5 district in America in wealth because of the Indian diaspora. The age-old friendship between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump is well known. They get along very well. They see the world very similarly. What has changed, though, are a couple things. First of all, Ukraine. Since the invasion of Ukraine, one of the major ways that Russia has funded this war is by selling oil to India and then them reselling it back to Europe, who, of course, that purchases all the money that Russia needs to fund this war. President Trump and Prime Minister Modi make a great agreement in which the United States will become its primary supplier of energy for both oil and gas. I think that's going to be really important into the future for stabilizing the regions and to make sure that there's no motivation to continue this war in Ukraine, funded through really not good ways, quite frankly. And I think, too, in this one, we have to make sure that the American people are seeing the same perception for all countries, that if we're being imposed tariffs, and I know that I heard the reporting earlier that it's not that big a deal. To America, it's been a big deal because for a long time, we've been on the short end of the stick. The average tariffs we place on Indian products is about 2 to 3%. The average from India is about 13 to 15%. I think President Trump just want to make sure this it's reciprocal, that it's even, that it gives us a fair and balanced trading, whether it's 0 or it's 15%. We want to have it the same so we can have a true free trade society.
Right. Congressman Rich McCormick, thank you so much for your time. Right, and also we, of course, take our discussions further on this big bilateral meeting in the US between PM Modi and President Donald Trump. Joining me on the broadcast now is Dr. Brahmachalani, strategic affairs expert, and John Danilowitz, a former US diplomat and foreign policy analyst. Thank you to both of you, and thanks for waiting patiently. Dr. Brahmachalani, coming to you first. There's a general consensus that this was a very positive meeting for India. So do you think that this was the best outcome in a way that the Indian contingent could have hoped for, that Prime Minister Modi could have hoped for after these meetings are now concluded?
The purpose of this trip by Prime Minister Modi to Washington was to mend the relationship with the US that had begun to fray during President Joe Biden's presidency. So in that sense, it appears that this trip has managed to begin the process of restoring the relationship. No major deal was announced during this trip. As far as Trump is concerned, he lived up to his reputation of being a clever businessman who blends some flattery with hard bargaining, and we saw that during the joint news conference. He lavished praise on Modi while also warning that he would be imposing tariffs on India, that he wants fairness and reciprocity. So all that was on display. But I think overall, this visit by Modi should begin the process of restoring the momentum in the US-India relationship.
Right. John Danilowitz, let's hear from you. What are your thoughts on the meeting?
Yeah, well, again, I think the optics were very positive, and again, the symbolism of the visit coming early in the Trump administration's term. I think what the two sides did, as the foreign secretary mentioned, is they basically set out the agenda for the relationship going forward, and now the hard work of implementation begins. Teams from both sides will be meeting over the coming weeks and months to try to put some flesh on this skeleton that the two leaders outlined. I think that, again, if you step back, while the personal relationship between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi is clearly very warm, what the agenda laid out and the joint statement mentions is really a more continuity of positive trends in bilateral relationship that have gone on now for a number of years.
All right. If I can be a very less time on this particular show, though, a quick word from both of you. Dr. Brahmachalani, how do you think that this particular meeting now, we've already discussed some of the key takeaways from it, but how do you think this is going to in any way impact India's relationship with other key global players as well? As we know, the Russia-Ukraine war was also discussed.
Trump is seeking to end the Ukraine war. That war has had an impact across the world. It has helped fuel rise in prices. Oil prices, food prices have gone up across the world. So ending that war is good news for the world. Is also good news for the US-India relationship, because the differences between the Biden administration and the Modi government actually came to the surface after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. In terms of the US-India economic relationship, India is the only Asian economy that trades more with the US than with China. Other Asian economies, they have China as the main trading partner. For India, another thing significant is that the US is the only major economy with which India has a trade surplus. India has an overall trade deficit with the rest of the world. Now, India is under pressure to drastically reduce its trade surplus with the US. The question is how? Trump made clear that he wants India to buy more American hydrocarbons and more American weapons. Mm-hmm. That is exactly what he sought to do in his first term. And India's imports of American oil and petroleum products during Trump's first term went up very sharply from 2019 for 4 years in a row.
Right.
There was a spike in Indian imports of American hydrocarbons. The thing is that hydrocarbons and weapons plus gems, they dominate the US-India trade. And India is already the world's largest importer of weapons. So there isn't much room for India to keep buying more American weapons and more American hydrocarbons. But the big challenge for India would be to find ways to reduce its trade surplus with the US.
Right. Quickly, John Danilowitz, your thoughts on this?
Sure. So clearly the Trump administration has signaled the priority it's going to place on the Indo-Pacific and the competition with China. For this reason, the US is trying to wrap up or to minimize its engagement in Europe and the Middle East. Like relationships between any major powers, there will be areas of convergence between the US and India, and there's a clear commitment to work on those. But there will also be areas of friction. So I think the real test will be how the Trump and Modi administrations balance this, finding the ways to work together while managing the areas of conflict or different priorities that will inevitably come up.
Right. Dr. Brahmachalani and John Danilowitz, thank you so much for joining me on the broadcast this morning. In fact, we'll be heading into a short break at this point, but stay tuned here on NDTV. We will be bringing you more expert voices on what could be some of the key outcomes for India from this high-stakes meeting held in Washington, D.C. Join us after this very short break.
There is a growing realization across the global capitals that this is a relationship which is fast moving beyond the pale of bilateralism into truly a force for global good.
Looking ahead to Prime Minister Modi's visit here to Washington, D.C. as he meets with President Donald Trump.
I do think, though, there are real opportunities for the U.S. and India to work together.
I think you look at both President Trump and Prime Minister Modi as leaders that really want to bring an end to wars, and particularly the war in Ukraine.
It's a short visit, but it's a visit of consequence. This is Nikunj Garg reporting for NDTV from Washington, D.C.
Mahakumbh, the festival of faith, the world's biggest spiritual festival, the divine dip at the spiritual Sangam, a sacred confluence of faith, culture and heritage. NDTV's mega coverage of the Mega Fest. NDTV at Mahakumbh 2025.
As India accelerates its growth towards self-reliance, India Inc. is leading the charge. From market dominance to manufacturing, from AI breakthroughs to disruptive innovations, India is setting the roadmap for a Viksit Bharat. Join us as business leaders, policymakers and ministers come together at the NDTV Profit Conclave 2025, the blueprint for Viksit Bharat, February 18th, 10 a.m. onwards. Tune in only on the NDTV network.
I've been reporting on all issues big and small from Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, rest of South India, bringing you all the action, all that you need to know, all that you want to know.
The energy of Maximum City is infectious. I bring in that energy in our news coverage from financial capital Mumbai.
Covering from the southernmost part of India over the last 23 years, I bring in-depth and 360-degree coverage from the Dravidian heartland.
The land of Mishti is also known for its bitter politics. I have seen much water flow under the Howrah Bridge, covering Bengal in all its vivid colors.
This week on India Ascents,
we decode the ins and outs of the historic PM Modi-President Trump meet. Mumbai to Marseille, why IMEC is poised to bring the global north and south together, and how BrahMos missile is pushing India to the forefront of military innovation and reshaping global defense dynamics.
all this and more only on India Ascents with me, Gauri Dwivedi, at these timings on the NDTV network.
Big budget day. Big newsmakers on NDTV. Top ministers and opposition leaders.
ये by the people, of the people and for the people budget.
It is a fulfilling budget.
This is a development budget.
It's one of the finest budgets I've ever seen.
More than a bold move, it is a clever move.
NDTV, always the first choice of newsmakers. NDTV keeps you ahead.
There is a growing realization across the global capitals that this is a relationship which is fast moving beyond the pale of bilateralism into truly a force for global good.
Looking ahead to Prime Minister Modi's visit here to Washington, D.C. as he meets with President Donald Trump.
I do think, though, there are real opportunities for the U.S. and India to work together.
I think you look at both President Trump and Prime Minister Modi as leaders that really want to bring an end to wars, and particularly the war in Ukraine.
It's a short visit, but it's a visit of consequence. This is Nikunj Garg reporting for NDTV from Washington, D.C.
Mahakumbh, a festival of faith, the world's biggest spiritual festival, the divine dip at the spiritual Sangam, a sacred confluence of faith, culture and heritage. NDTV's mega coverage of the Mega Fest. NDTV at Mahakumbh 2025.
As India accelerates its growth towards self-reliance, India Inc. is leading the charge. From market dominance to manufacturing, from AI breakthroughs to disruptive innovations, India is setting the roadmap for a Viksit Bharat. Join us as business leaders, policymakers and ministers come together at the NDTV Profit Conclave 2025, the blueprint for Viksit Bharat, February 18th, 10 a.m. onwards. Tune in only on the NDTV network.
I've been reporting on all issues big and small from Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, rest of South India, bringing you all the action, all that you need to know, all that you want to know.
The energy of Maximum City is infectious. I bring in that energy in our news coverage from financial capital Mumbai.
Covering from the southernmost part of India over the last 23 years, I bring in-depth and 360-degree coverage from the Dravidian heartland.
The land of Mishti is also known for its bitter politics. I have seen much water flow under the Howrah Bridge, covering Bengal in all its vivid colors.
Good morning. You're watching NDTV's special broadcast on the big bilateral meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Donald Trump in Washington, D.C. On the show, we will focus on the key highlights and deep dive into the main takeaways. My colleague Nikunj Garg, who's covering this bilateral in D.C., is also going to join me on the broadcast. But first up, let's take a look at the headlines at top of 8 a.m. Prime Minister Modi at White House, and there's dosti on display between him and President Trump. Modi 3.0 plus Trump 2.0 equals India-US